Hi everyone, I'm Adam Wright with Lee Schools TV. I am joined by Superintendent Dr. Greg Adkins. Dr. Adkins, thanks for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. Good to be here.
So we recently pushed out a video where I sat down with Dr. Spiro and we discussed the various instructional models that are available to families this upcoming school year. For this video, we'll be discussing the more in-depth plan for students who choose to physically return to their brick and mortar campus in the fall. The State Department of Education recently announced that all schools must open full-time for students. Before we get into what a school day will look like for students who are returning to campus, can you touch on why it's important for the physical buildings, school buildings, to reopen for students?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I think the best way for a kid to get an education is in front of a high-quality teacher, and you can really only do that in a brick and mortar school. While I think we do a great job virtually, and that's always a model I think we're continuing to improve, there's nothing like being in front of a high-quality teacher. Secondly, there's a lot of services that we provide kids at school, social-emotional learning, a lot of needs that are met there, feeding them lunch, getting them health care in some cases, and it's very, very difficult to do that from a virtual setting. So being in school, I think it's just, I think we need that social interaction with kids, with teachers, with their friends. They need to see their friends, and it's just easier to provide in those services there in a schoolhouse.
Now, while of course educating students is our main responsibility, it's also a top priority to make sure that they're safe when they return to school. So we as a district organized a pandemic task force that met over the past several weeks to discuss all the precautions that we should take for when students return to school. Can you briefly touch on who was part of that task force and how often they met and what was discussed? Because you were on it.
Yeah, I was on it, and it was a group of community leaders, parents, teachers. We also had our medical experts there because we're talking about a health issue, and many of us are educators. That's our chosen profession, but we get advice from our medical professionals, and then of course we want the input of parents, and we want the input of teachers and administrators. So all of that diverse group came together to hear our plans, to discuss those plans, and I think ultimately come forward with a pretty good recommendation.
And so let's get into those recommendations that came from the task force. So students who are returning to campus, what will their day look like? Let's start with the hot topic of masks.
Right.
Will students be required to wear masks at school?
It depends on the situation that the student is in. First of all, if we start the day, you're going to get the kid to school, and some of our kids are going to be boarding school buses to get there. On these school buses, it's very, very difficult to socially distance. While we don't expect to have as many riders as we had last year because of virtual learning and so forth, we do expect to have some of our buses to have a number of people on them, so social distancing is going to be very, very difficult. So we are requiring our students wear masks while they are on a school bus. When they exit the campus, we are going to be doing some safety checks there. So we'll be able to socially distance, and then we'll check student temperatures as they come into the building. But then
when they exit the bus, I think.
Yeah, when they exit the bus, right? When they exit the bus, we'll get them spread out, and then we'll move them into the schoolhouse after having that check to keep everybody safe. In the hallways, that's another place where masks are going to be required because we're unable to socially distance in those hallways. And then the other recommendation that the task force had was that the masks are also going to be expected to be worn, not necessarily required, but expected to be worn in classrooms where the class size prevents socially distancing from being able to occur.
Okay, so masks required on the bus.
On the bus.
Required in the hallways.
Yes.
And expected in the classroom.
Expected in the classroom, and then lastly, expected in some of those large areas like cafeterias where you are unable to socially distance. Now, obviously, if you have students eating, you're not going to be wearing your mask, but moving to and from those large areas is where that would occur.
So will the district or individual schools, will they be providing masks for students who may not have one?
They will be providing masks in the case where a student does not have a mask. We'll even have those masks available on buses, so if a student gets on a bus, does not have a mask, we'll be able to provide one there as well.
You mentioned the temperature checks that will happen before students go inside the building. So you mentioned that students getting off a bus will have their temperatures checked, and then every student, if their parents are driving them to school, or if they walk or ride their bike to school, before they enter the building, there will be staff members taking their temperatures. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, depending on how the student comes into the school, we are definitely going to have staff members that will be there available to take their temperature, deployed on bus ramps, like you said, also on parent pickup, or where we have walkers or riders. We're also asking our parents to give us a hand here as well. One of the things that you can do as a parent is before that child even leaves your home, is make sure that kid does not have a temperature. Make sure that they're feeling well. Just kind of take that extra effort to check in with your kid and make sure that they're feeling safe. That way, you're not all the way to school and then all to discover that, my kid has a temperature. So I think if all of us work together to monitor these health symptoms and take appropriate action, I think we'll all be better off.
And the temperature threshold that we'll be working with is 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, correct?
That's correct.
So what happens if a student has a temperature higher than that?
Well, one of the things that we do want to make sure is that because it's hot in Florida, as you know, we're talking about returning to school in August, so a walker could potentially be running at temperature. So you have to make sure that the kid is cooled down before that temperature is taken. Now, if we do have a student that obviously is running a temperature after we've done that temperature check, then what we have to do is we have to make sure that student is isolated. So we have isolation rooms that are going to be set up in our school buildings, and then from that point forward, we're going to be in touch with the parent to make sure the parent comes and picks that student up.
And going back to busing, you mentioned that masks will be required for students riding the bus. I believe I also read that there will be assigned seats for students on the bus. Is that correct?
That is correct. When a student comes on the bus, that's a course so we can socially distance. We do believe that most of our buses are running somewhere between 20 and 40, so we'll be able to spread out on those buses. We also can keep certain groups together, like siblings, for example, can sit close together. They're at home all the time together anyway, so if we're going to have to put students close together, it would be better to put those students close together that are at the same bus stop or that live in a home together like siblings.
And the bus drivers will be responsible for making sure that the bus is cleaned thoroughly daily, correct?
Daily and between routes. Actually, because a lot of our bus operators will have 2 routes in the morning, 2 routes in the evening. So between those routes, they will also be responsible to make sure that bus is clean before they start their next route.
So while students are at school, the amount of visitors who are allowed to come to the school, that will be limited, correct?
Yes, we're going to have to limit the number of visitors. Now, obviously, there will be some people that we'll have to allow in the schools. We have, contractors that may have to come in and do work and so forth. But yes, we have to limit the number of people coming in and out of the building.
And while students they get to school, they may see some kind of barrier or plexiglass at the front lobby, right? That protecting the staff at the front lobby. They make their way into the hallway at school. What are some things that may be different just walking down a hallway when school starts?
Remember, we're really trying to keep some social distancing going on throughout the entire school day. So you have to kind of rethink all those systems in the school in terms of how kids get to and from class to make sure that social distancing occurs. There's some things that you can do that make this a lot easier, and one would be one direction hallways. So you have, where if you're going down this hallway, everybody's flowing in the same direction, so you can keep everybody distanced and you're not running into each other. Anytime where students have to stand and wait in the line, one thing you can see is marks on the floor to where a student knows where to stand and knows to keep that 6-foot appropriate distance if we're in a line, like let's say a food line or a serving line. The other thing I think that's important to keep in mind, and this is for everybody, we are an educational institution. So if we teach our students and our parents and our communities about how to stay safe, I think that we're all going to be healthier as a result of that. So proper signage or using opportunities like this to kind of get the word out in terms of what safe practices are. This is what you're going to see a lot more of. announcements that they do in schools, or parent notifications that go out. All of this stuff I think will help keep our kids and our employees safe.
And I believe I read in one of the presentations given to the board that small or large gatherings of students, staff may be directed to try to limit those as much as possible, which might sound upsetting to some people, especially students. They're coming back to school, they want to gather and talk with their friends. They haven't seen them in a long time, but it's important to limit large gatherings in close quarters of students, correct?
Yeah, very, very important to do that. So our staff is doing everything they can to literally utilize the entire facility. So that means spreading out. We're going to use large spaces to spread out, like our cafeterias, but even outside our cafeterias, to help spread kids out to eat. We cannot do certain activities like, let's say, pep rallies, where you jam everybody into a gymnasium. They're a lot of fun. I mean, I used to enjoy them when I was in high school, but right now we're not going to be able to do them just to keep our kids safe.
Yeah, inside the classroom. Mm-hmm. How will that look different? What are some measures that are going to be taken inside the classroom during instruction time to help keep students and teachers safe?
Well, the first thing we're doing right now is we're eliminating all non-essential furniture. So just getting out those excessive file cabinets and bookshelves and things like that, so that we can actually spread student desks out as much as we possibly can. So just, I think, elimination of all of that. The other thing that we're doing in the classroom is, and this is kind of unfortunate for those of us that are really embracing some diverse ways of teaching, but going back to really spreading students out and having everybody pointing in one direction. Mm-hmm. I think that's important instead of the grouping that we used to do, and may hopefully get back to in the future. But for right now, keeping everybody spread out, pointing in one direction. I think that thinking about the instructional model and how we deliver, we always have to make sure that we're keeping kids apart from each other while we're delivering instruction.
And also trying to limit, or I believe prevent, any sharing of supplies among students, right?
Right, so everybody has their own Chromebook, for example. The days of where we put a basket in there that everybody could grab a pencil out of, I mean, those are going to be kind of temporarily suspended until we're on the other side of this. So all types of things like that, just to keep kids safe.
So middle of the day rolls around, what will lunch look like? I'm assuming cafeterias aren't going to be packed full of students anymore like they used to be, right?
Yes, our school leaders are going to have to be pretty innovative when it comes to feeding our students. They know their buildings the best, so we've given our administrators some autonomy to help to really build systems that keep kids spread out. They're going to be utilizing, again, like I said before, that building to its absolute capacity. So spreading kids out in the cafeteria, spreading kids outside the cafeteria in some of those outdoor cafes, and even utilizing the classrooms in some cases where we need to, or other large spaces to feed kids.
Will the lunches be like a typical lunch where they have a tray and they get individual food items, or will they be all grab and go style?
More of a grab and go style than what we're used to seeing in the past. So you're limiting the amount of interaction that you used to see, where kids, like salad bars, you won't see salad bars where kids will be able to grab salads and things like that. So a lot more grab and go.
And I know all the food and nutrition staff members, they will be wearing masks and gloves.
That's correct.
Going back to the class, will some students be eating in the classroom, or it will be a mixture of in the classroom? And
it would be a mixture depending on the building. Again, that's a building level decision. Like you think about breakfast. In some cases, kids eat breakfast in the classroom, and some of them eat in the cafeteria. And I would see us doing something similar, still doing that in the future, but doing it in such a way that we can ensure that kids are spread out more than they may have been last year.
I'd like to bring up the difference between elementary and secondary schools. Elementary students are used to having the same teacher all day long, being in the same classroom with the same students all day long. So for them, it would be easy to keep them all together all day long. What about middle and high school students who are used to, every hour or so changing, walking through the hallways, switching classes, going to a new teacher with a new mixture of students? Are we changing that up at all?
Again, at certain schools you may see a little of that change where they can. Like for example, in a middle school you can do a certain degree of teaming. That means you can cohort teachers and you can, or students, and then you can move the teachers. But it's very difficult to do that in a high school and some of our middle schools, quite frankly. So I think what you'll see instead is back to how we move students, limiting the amount of movements that we're doing in a day, which does help with the block schedule because you don't have as many hall changes, but then making sure that when you do have to change classes, that you're keeping kids staggered in terms of how those class changes occur, and also you're utilizing systems like keeping them flowing in one direction only, and upstairs and downstairs, that type of thing. That way you limit the number of students coming in contact with each other.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about is what about extracurricular activities or special area classes where students of all ages are used to leaving their classroom to go to PE or recess or music or art class, or, well, before I get too ahead of myself, why don't we just focus on recess and PE? Will those still occur?
They will still occur. They'll be somewhat different than they were last year. For example, recess, kids are going to do that with their particular class. So you would go out with your class, that group of kids that you're with all day for your recess. So unlike the days that you might have seen last year where the entire third and fourth grade would go out and all mix in together, this is where we keep a class together, and they would go out for recess on their own. When it comes to PE, PE is something that, we're looking at how we're going to do PE differently, where we're going to still do PE, but we're going to have to do PE in such a way where we can socially distance. So using that gymnasium or outdoor spaces, thinking about what type of activities we can do with kids are things that I think we're going to have to change up a little bit to keep our kids safe.
Such as making sure equipment is
not
cleaned
shared.
down?
Yeah, exactly. Equipment cleaned. You can't share equipment, because sometimes equipment we don't have enough for every kid. So if you want to do, badminton or something, you're sharing the rackets and stuff. Those are things that our PE teachers may not be able to do.
Okay, what about let's say a band class? Will they be able to operate in the same way, or like a choral group?
Both of those we're still taking a look at. I don't have a good answer for you right now. We do have a fine arts committee, which is comprised of people who, that's their area of expertise, and they're looking at those very questions right now, and we'll be communicating that out when we have answers.
How will after-school programs or extracurriculars, after-school, clubs, things like that, will students still have the opportunity to go to those?
Yes, they will still have that opportunity. Again, I think we just try to follow some safety guidelines to make them safe.
Another big one will be, sports.
Yes.
Especially high school, junior varsity sports. What will that look like?
Right now, we're still planning to move forward with sports, but again, like some of these contact sports and things like that, we don't have a final answer on that yet. I know Mr. LaRosa is working with the Florida High School Athletic Association, and we should have some answers before the start of school.
All right, I'm gonna throw a question at you that I didn't have written down on the paper. But what would you say to a student who is hearing this and is thinking that this stinks? This isn't the school day I was used to, or what would you say to them?
I think this is a very difficult time in all of our lives right now, and we are having to make some changes to keep ourselves safe as we move through this pandemic. But I will tell kids, I really think we're going to be on the other side of this. I really, really do, and I think I'm looking forward to a time where life can get back to normal. We can get back to having proms and high school football games and being able to do those hands-on labs where everybody's in there working together. You know, we produced a Vision 2030 video, which you guys put together. And as I watched that video, you know, I looked at all the interactions between kids and teachers, and a lot of close contact there, a lot of hands-on type of activities, and that's how learning best occurs. And I think we'll get back there some. This is only temporary, and we'll get to the other side of that together.
What happens if a class or a school you know, may be forced to shut down for a period of time? Is there a plan in place if that happens?
There is a plan in place, and let me first of all tell everybody that this is not going to go smoothly at the beginning of the year. So do not expect everything to go perfectly, because quite honest, we have to be very, very flexible and agile, and because there are going to be people that get diagnosed with this at some point. It's already happening in society. And so we're going to have to be able to close down a classroom and go virtual learning very quickly, and then flex and come back and bring that classroom back online once we've gone through the proper quarantine period. We have a task force that's assigned to do this, that's going to be communicating with our parents, that's going to be in constant communication with the Department of Health to make sure that we're doing the proper protocols when it comes to identifying positive cases, taking the necessary actions that we need to take, moving, transitioning to a distance learning type of environment, and then when we're safe to come back, transitioning back. I can see us closing down individual classrooms in some cases. There may be a situation where I have to close down a school. Hopefully we won't have to do a district closure to virtual again, but that could happen, and we have to be prepared for all of it.
Who makes that decision if it were to come down to it, the closing a school down, for example?
Ultimately, that's a decision that typically falls with the superintendent, but I want to assure everybody that this is a decision I make with a team. You know, I don't go out there and make that decision without consulting with our local medical experts and also my team down here and our board.
Okay, so what are the next steps? I know that, you know, we talked a lot about what a day will look like for students. I know a lot of teachers are probably watching this as well, and they may be interested in knowing what it will look like for them. But I know that the district has been working closely with TALC and SPALC, the unions, correct?
Yeah, that is correct. In fact, you know, I made a phone call down to the Chief Human Resources Officer today. Was unable to get her on the phone because she's talking to TALC and SPALC, and that's exactly what they're involved in right now. And they've been great partners. They have been a great conduit for teachers to express concerns to us, and then we've been able to make adjustments accordingly.
Because I know we want to make sure students are safe, but you know, we care about our teachers as well.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, you know, we're talking our teachers, you know, some of our teachers you have medical issues that they're dealing with. They're older, they may have they may have a loved one at home that may be health compromised, and we have to take all of that into consideration. And you know, because when you come into a schoolhouse, that's a very close, socially interactive environment, and what steps are you going to do to make sure that not only the kids are safe, but also that employee is safe? So that's why we're hoping to provide options for our employees as well, and also provide our employees with the proper protection. For example, you know, we have face masks that are available, but also the face shields. You know, because some of our teachers, you know, will need that extra protection that covers the eyes. Some of our teachers want to be able to have their students be able to see their mouth, and this face shield allows that to happen while still keeping that teacher safe. So these are things that we're going to do to help them stay safe while we open schools.
All right, and I know there's discussion about the possibility of potentially pushing back the start of the school year. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. I asked our team a while ago to start to put together some scenarios in case that would be something that we would need to do. I mean, we have to watch, you know, what is going on in our community right now. We have to stay in close contact with Lee Health and our local health department, which we are doing. and make sure that we are only opening schools when our community is able to open schools safely. So in order to do that, we have to look at the potential of having to open a little bit later, maybe 2 weeks later, or maybe 3 weeks later. So the team is actually putting together different scenarios and all the implications of that. And they're going to be presenting recommendations in the very near future.
All right. That's all the questions I have.
Okay.
We'll be continually pushing out more information to the public as often as we can. Is there anything else that you wanted to mention?
Well, I just want to encourage everybody to just stay tuned to all of our communications that we push out there. Make sure that if you have questions, like I know Dr. Spiro talked to you about the different types of models. If you have questions about those models, please reach out to us. We want to be able to answer those concerns as well about reopening. We do read all those emails and try to respond to all of them, and I think all of it helps us make a better decision in the end.
All right, yes. Visit our website regularly, leeschools.net. Follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and we're on Instagram as well. Mm-hmm. And yes, we will do our best to keep you all informed about this upcoming school year. Dr. Adkins, thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for watching.